Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Mr. Russell, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. I'm very excited for this one because you dropped it at the end of our last discussion. I was like, no way.
Right, right. Yeah, Robbie, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me back. It's always good talking with you. Yeah, we were talking about the my investigation of the Lincoln assassination and how that came to be, how that came about, and it was a really amazing thing. We were living in New York at the time, so I got this email from out of the blue, and it was from Atlas Media in New York City. And the producer that was working on the show was Jim Mullen. And they were casting for a psychic for this new series that they were going to do called Psychic History. So the premise of the show was that they would go to all these historical venues and the psychic would weigh in with the psychic input, and then they would see if that expanded the historical account or diminished it or whatever, and how much they could validate and so on and so forth. So that was the concept behind the show. And so, anyways, they wanted me to do an audition tape, and they said, we just want to see how you sound and how you come across on camera. So, don't make a big deal out of it. Just be yourself, be relaxed, be normal. Just talk about, give us something that'll give us some idea of yourself, your experiences, your history as a psychic, and so on and so forth. So, my wife and I had a video camera, and in this house that we lived in, and of course, wherever I go, I attract paranormal phenomena, like bees to a flower. And so we had all this paranormal phenomena happening constantly, and so we decided that would be the subject of the audition tape, that we'd talk about some of that. And so on the tape, we went up into the attic where some of the loudest, most vivid phenomena occurred, and we decided we'd shoot the tape in the attic. And they wanted me to introduce myself, say who I was. And so my wife and I were sitting there, and she was filming me. And every time I'd introduce myself, we'd both crack up. We'd both just start laughing uncontrollably. We couldn't stop from cracking up. So we finally made it through cracking each other up, and finally got a good take, and sent that off. So the show was a collaboration between Atlas Media, which is one of the biggest media corporations in New York City, and the History Channel. So they were collaborating on this, and so I sent the audition tape in. They looked at it. Atlas liked it. History Channel liked it. So they said, okay, let's go to a screen test. So for the screen test, the producer came out, Jim Mullen, with some camera crew, and they came to my house to meet me to get to know me and everything, and get a little background on me and talk to me a little bit and just kind of size me up and so on and so forth. So for the screen test on camera, they had chosen this location there in New York, and some of the history was known. And then they wanted to see if I could pick up on that history or what else I could pick up on that they might be able to verify down the road. So we all got in the car, got in their vehicle, and went to this location. And they just filmed me and said, just be natural. And every now and then they'd give me some direction or want me to do this or want me to do that. But basically, it's just, we're going to follow you around, and you tell us what you pick up on, what you see, what you feel, what you hear psychically or whatever. And that's what we'll send into Atlas and the History Channel. So we went to this location with a camera, and I began to get impressions and visions and hear things and see ghosts from the past and circumstances and things from the past. And I explained all of this to them in detail as to what I was seeing, what I was feeling, what I was picking up on. And it could be from the relatively mundane. One example, we went in this place and I said, this door didn't used to be here. This used to be like a coal bin or something, and the door used to be over there. And sure enough, that was correct. They had moved the door and so on and so forth. So I would pick up on relatively mundane things like that, all the way to people's names that had been in that area, that had lived and died there. I remember in particular, I don't remember the name right now off the top of my head. It's been so long ago that we shot the pilot, but I got this name, and it was an unusual name. It wasn't a common name. And when we got through shooting the pilot, they had access to all this research and everything from the area, and the docents that were in this place as well, and their knowledge. And they researched that, and sure enough, they found that name, and that person had been there and had lived and died in that location. So there were just a ton of things like that that I got that we were able to validate, and they liked my on camera presence. They liked the way I spoke, the way I came across, and they were pretty well astonished by the amount of things that I had picked up on that they were able to validate. And so they sent in the screen test then to the History Channel. The History Channel liked it and gave us a go for the pilot. So the pilot episode was on the trail of the assassin, on the trail of an assassin. And that was on the trail of John Wilkes Booth, who had shot and killed Abraham Lincoln. And the format of the show, and it really killed me that we shot the thing. It was in the can. It was edited. I got to see a fine cut of it. It was absolutely beautifully done, very tastefully and respectfully done. And I think we, in all seriousness, would have set the standard for all paranormal shows to come. It was that well done. And then it never aired. And that broke all of our hearts. And especially me, I was signed to like a 5-year contract. And each year, of course, the pay was better and so on and so forth. And I was like, wow, this is really terrific. So when it never even went to air, I was doubly disappointed. But anyways, while we were shooting the pilot, we loaded up in New York City, and then we drove to DC and to Maryland, so on and so forth. And um, what we got access to, due to the cachet of Atlas Media and the History Channel, we got access to places that people ordinarily couldn't. And there were, in the past, some so-called psychic investigators, psychics, paranormal investigators, that had gone to these historic places and basically just kind of made asses out of themselves. And to the point that the people were like, there's never going to be a psychic coming here again. We're never going to have paranormal investigators coming here again. It's these people just act too stupid, too goofy, too ridiculous. They would scream and yell and, oh, something touched me, and then faint and swoon and things like that. And they were like, no, we're not having any of this kind of nonsense. So Atlas and the History Channel assured them, said, look, we've vetted this guy, we've researched this guy. Out of everybody we've looked at for this role, this is the guy we've chosen. We've talked to him in person. We did a screen test. We're super impressed with him. He appears to be the real deal. He got all this information that was accurate that he couldn't have done any other way. And we guarantee he's not going to come in with any stupidity or any histrionics or anything that'll embarrass anybody or anything like that. So with that guarantee, we got open access to all of these places, the Peterson House, Ford's Theater, the Mud House. We got open access to these places with just me, the film crew, and the docents. No tourists, nobody else there. They would shut the place down until we were coming, let us in, then lock up behind us, and the docents would leave. And it was just me and the film crew, and I got to wander through these places at will and pick up all these incredible bits of psychic history, all this wonderful psychic energy that was still resident there. And I got to pick that up and analyze that and go through all these things. So it was one of the most phenomenal experiences ever. And I remember the first place we went to Ford Theater. And I just had this psychic hit as we were walking up. They were filming me going down the sidewalk and filming me walking up the steps to go in Ford's Theater. And I got this huge psychic impression came over me, this bit of psychic input. And before I started walking up the steps to the theater, I turned around and I looked at everybody and I said, the door's locked. And my producer went, no. They know we're coming. They're expecting us. I said, the door's locked. And he said, no, it's going to be all right. They're expecting us. And I walked up the steps, tried the door was locked. And I turned around and laughed. I said, I told you the door was locked. He was like, holy cow. So we had to call him and have him come and open up the door. So to me, that just tickled me. It was just nice to get this little bit of psychic input that that, kind of added a little bit of humor to the situation, kind of validated, okay, this guy does have some input and so on and so forth.
You weren't
Tall,
nervous at
serious.
all, even with the cameras on you?
Do what now?
You weren't nervous at all with all the cameras on you?
Yeah, I really wasn't. Um, I think maybe initially I was a little bit nervous with the cameras on me because I'd never been on camera before, and it was like, okay, how am I going to come across? And I got to be aware of my mannerisms and how I'm talking and my body movements and all this type of thing. So I was a little concerned about that at first, and then as it went on, it just suddenly became very natural to me, and it was just this kind of natural, easy thing to be on camera. And by the time it took us a week to shoot the pilot episode, which they cut down to 30 minutes to fit in a 30-minute runtime. And it took us a week to shoot that. And by the time the end of the week rolled around, I was basically kind of a camera ham. I was really enjoying the camera and enjoying being on camera. So it actually became kind of fun. But they followed me around with the camera everywhere. And in Ford's Theater, um, the first thing that I got, we were walking up the stairs to go to the presidential box, which is upstairs where Lincoln was shot. And as we were walking up the stairs, I said, "There's a woman walking past me in period costume," and she's like holding a little parasol or something. She has like on a hat or a bonnet and so on. And I described the dress that she was in, and I said, "She's giving me a name, and it's like an Olly name, like Polly or Molly or Dolly." And I think I finally settled on a name, and I don't even remember which one it was now. I think it may have been Molly, but that was Lincoln's nickname for his wife, was Molly. And then there was somebody that was also in the play that dressed in period costume, that was in costume like that in the play, and their name was the same or similar. And like I say, this has been a long time ago since we shot this, so I don't remember all the details exactly. So I got that, and then as we got into the theater, um, I began to get these impressions from all of the energies and all of the spirits that had been there. And I believe that some of those spirits actually came back to interact with me while I was there. Because I remember I was sitting there, they had me sit down in one of the seats, and I was just looking out over the stage, and the presidential box was over to my right. And I remember as I sat there, I saw this spirit in a suit that was a period era suit peer around the corner from where the entrance into the presidential box was, and motion to me like, "Come here, come over. I've got things to tell you." So I told him that, and we went over to the presidential box, and there were pictures of people that were involved in the conspiracy at the time. And one of the people that was involved in the conspiracy, it was his picture. It was that person that leaned around as a spirit and motioned me to come over to the box. I recognized him from his picture. So that was pretty astonishing. And we were standing outside the presidential box looking in, and I was picking up all this revelation, all this information. And I said, there were a lot of people involved in this conspiracy. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But I said there was way more people involved in this than what people realized. And I said there were some people that were beginning to get cold feet and were beginning to back out. And they were saying, and they were trying to talk the others out of this, out of the assassination. And we validated that as time went on. But anyways, what made some of this so really interesting was I told my producer when we started this, I said, "You couldn't have got anybody better to validate um, psychic input on this, to validate that my input psychically is correct, because I'm the worst student of history there is on the planet." I said, "I hate history. I don't like history. I've never studied history. Literally in school, I was the guy that put the crib notes, wrote the crib notes in ink on his hand to try and pass the history test. I hated history. I absolutely hated it." So I said, "I know that Booth shot Lincoln. I said, that's all I know. I said, beyond that, I'm clueless, absolutely, totally clueless. So all of these things that I were getting came to me psychically and not from any previous knowledge that I had or any research I had done or anything like that. So one of the really interesting things he asked me while we were standing there at the presidential box, he said, do he said when Booth jumped to the stage, he was supposed to have yelled something. Can you get that? Did he say anything or do anything? And I stood there for a minute, and I could see Booth jump from the presidential box to the stage. I could see it psychically. And I said, yeah, he yells something. He stands up and yells something at the crowd. But I said, I can't understand it. I said, it's short. It's like just a short burst of a few words, but I can't make sense out of it. I can't understand it. And the reason I couldn't understand it was
It was
because
Latin.
I couldn't get the translation of it, because when he jumped on stage, he yelled "Sic semper
Yeah.
tyrannis," you know,
Sincepa tyrannus is what it
yeah,
is.
and thus always to tyrants. And I couldn't understand the Latin. I couldn't get it. I said, yeah, he's yelling something, but I can't make sense out of it. I can't understand it. So that was kind of funny. And then I said, there's just this overwhelming sense of sadness here. And there was just this incredible aura of sadness over what had happened there. And I said, I don't want to be here anymore. That's the feeling I get. That's how heavy the sadness is. And we did a little bit more investigation there. And then we went downstairs, and there's a museum there. And there's some of the original artifacts, and there's some that are reproductions, is the case in a lot of the places there. And for me, it doesn't matter if an object's the real thing or an artifact, because I can still tune in on the energies, the thought processes, and the emotions behind whatever that object represents, whether it's the real deal or a replica. So they had a lot of things there in the case. And one of the things they had in the case was the door into the presidential box, and it had a hole drilled in it. And they had a sign up there that said that John Wilkes Booth had drilled that hole into the door so that he would be able to go up there and look in and see where Lincoln was seated at in the box. And time his attack to burst in and shoot Lincoln, he'd know exactly where he was at. He could look in there and see when Lincoln was distracted by the play and so on and so forth. So I looked at that and I said, no, this is not right. I said, Booth did not drill that hole. I said, somebody had that hole drilled by a workman or someone in the theater that by doing so would not arouse suspicion because they're supposed to be there. So they had it done by someone in the theater, by a workman in the theater that, just status quo, normal stuff. The guy works for the theater. He's here. He's doing what he's supposed to do. But Booth did not drill that hole. I said it was done at someone's request by a workman in the theater. So I told him, I said, no, I said, Booth did not drill this hole. He had it drilled, or someone had it drilled by someone that worked in the theater. And sure enough, when we got through shooting the pilot, and we started doing all the research, and they had access to every library on the planet and every book on the planet and all the Lincoln experts on the planet. We even had some Lincoln experts in the pilot episode. And sure enough, they discovered that Booth didn't drill the hole, that the guy that owned the theater had a workman in the theater drill the hole in the door, just like I said. And ostensibly, it was drilled so that Lincoln's bodyguard could look through the hole and keep an eye on Booth, on Lincoln, rather. And that begs the question, where was Lincoln's bodyguard when Booth came up to peer in and then burst in and shot Lincoln? Where was the bodyguard? Was the bodyguard in on it, perhaps? And that's one of the things that I began to ascertain and that I began to understand, was that the conspiracy went way deeper and involved more people than people understand. And I wasn't even aware of, from the history books and everything. They told me this later on after I had made that statement, that Lincoln's assassination was only a small part of this plot that went on. There were other people that were supposed to be assassinated that night, in government, and that this was a plot basically to bring down the United States government all in one fell swoop. And there were a lot of other people that were supposed to be assassinated, and it was supposed to be this night of chaos that just basically brought the U.S. government to a standstill and dismantled it overnight. So I began to understand that there were a lot of people involved in this, even back beyond the ones that had agreed to become the assassins, that had agreed to take part in this, that there were layers of this that went back and went back. And one of the things that I saw when we were still upstairs in Ford's Theater, and I was looking back out into the audience area there where all the seating was, I psychically saw this man sitting in the very back row. And it came to me instantly that he was there to oversee Booth's actions and to make sure that Booth didn't have second didn't second guess himself or have doubts or whatever, which I don't think Booth would have anyways. Booth was totally committed to this. Booth thought he was doing something great, and he was there to make sure that Booth went through with it, and also as a backup to activate other people that were there in case Booth got stymied or failed or somebody intercepted him. There were other people there that could have jumped in and continued the assassination attempt. So I saw that, and it was like, wow, this was like a really super well coordinated, really big deal. And indeed, one of the Lincoln experts said that while it was Booth's hand on the gun, there were a lot of fingers on the trigger. So there were so many people involved with this, and it went so deep, and the conspiracy was so deep and went so far. And that was one of the things that I picked up on. And so the focus of the investigation then became chasing Booth down, following the ghostly trail of John Wilkes Booth as he fled, and going to all the places that he went to, and in particular to ascertain his state of mind if I could. Because one of the things they always kept asking me was Booth at any point sorrowful for what he did? Did he have any regret? And I kept telling them at every stop, I said, he is absolutely non-repentant. He is 100% convinced he's done the right thing. He has absolutely no remorse and no regret in his heart. He's just absolutely convinced he's a hero, that he's done the right thing, that this was what he was born to do. So we left from Ford's Theater, went across the street to the Peterson House, which is where they carried Lincoln after he was shot. And he spent the night there and then died there the following morning, early the following morning. So while I was there, a couple of really interesting things I picked up on. I said, Mrs. Lincoln was here that night, correct? For the most of the night or all of the night. And they said, yeah. And I said, I don't know if anybody can validate this, but I said, I am seeing her like occasionally pacing back and forth through the house. It was like a little shotgun affair thing. And I said, I'm seeing her pacing back and forth through the house. And I said, she's screaming. I mean, like screeching, wailing. I mean, not just sitting crying, sobbing. I mean, like she is like a banshee, just wailing, just screeching loud at what's happened. She's so emotionally upset. And they researched it, and they said that during the night she would do that. She would just scream and screech so loud that it was unreal in her anguish and her grief. And she did that all night long there. The other thing I picked up on was we went to the bedroom area where Lincoln was in the bed where he had died the next morning. And I picked up that Lincoln knew what had happened the moment Booth burst in and the shot hit him. He was like, here it is. And, he had received something like 10,000 death threats in his life. And I mean, this guy was ballsy. You continue being that visible and that strong a president doing what he did after receiving like 10,000 death threats.
I mean, most of his excellence comes from before he even took office. That guy used to bare knuckle box. Everyone forgets, but he comes from he has like a lumberjack build. Like
Exactly,
he's
exactly.
a tough
So this
guy.
guy was brave. He was strong. He was courageous. And the interesting thing is, what I picked up on him is his consciousness ascertains what happened, and that he'd been shot. One of the things that was very, very strong in the energy that his spirit emitted was that he despised Booth, and he thought Booth to be so cowardly that Booth would do that and burst in, and take him by ambush with his wife sitting there while they're watching this play, and shoot him. He thought that was the most dastardly, most cowardly thing, which of course it was. And he was just outraged at that, just incensed. And the other thing, the most interesting thing I picked up about Lincoln was, as his spirit began to go in and out of his body as he was close to death, that he was just so matter of fact about his death, about, okay, I've done the best that I could. I guided the country the best I knew how. I've been the best person I knew how. I'm not regretful. I'm not remorseful. I'm not afraid. It's my time to go on. I know my physical body's dying. I know my spirit's leaving and going to the other side. And I'm totally embracing that. I'm totally ready for it. And it was just so powerful and so genuine and so real. And I was like, wow, I hope I'm that way when my time comes. I mean, he was like, okay, yeah, here it is. Let's go. So that was just absolutely astonishing.
Did
So
you
again,
change, well, did you change the mind of any of your Lincoln experts that were around you at the time?
I think that mostly what we did in kind of a collaborative way was that um, I was able to confirm what was already extant in history for the most part, with the exception of things like the hole in the door and things like that. But I think they were fascinated by the fact that I could come up with these bits of history that I didn't know, and some things that were not that well known, like the hole in the door, that then subsequently they could validate, or that we could find out through subsequent research. So I think it was a really eye-opening experience for them, and it was um, it was certainly a mind-blowing experience for me to stand in these places where this dramatic history had occurred, and to think, my God, I'm standing here where Lincoln was shot. I'm standing here where Booth walked up on this very spot where I'm standing right now and burst through this door and kill the president. It's just mind blowing to think that you're there, and then to get all the psychic information, all this history coming to you that you didn't know, and that subsequently we could validate, and so on and so forth. It was the most mind blowing thing. So again, they asked me there, do you feel anything more about Booth's mindset? And I said, he's totally convinced this is what he's supposed to have done. He's totally convinced that this was the right thing to do, that he's a hero to the country for doing this. And so we left there, and then we went on to, oh gosh, there was another place that we went to before we got to the mud house. I don't remember the name of it right now, but it was a place where some of the co-conspirators had met, and where they had conducted some business, and I was able to pick up on some of that. And I think Booth may have had just a very brief appearance there, or something on his way through, or may have hung around there briefly in the past, or whatever. But again, it was like, what's the mindset of Booth? What's going on? I said, he's still 100% convinced that he's done the right thing. He has no remorse, has no regret. So as we followed the trail of where Booth fled, as he left Washington, and as he fled through the countryside, we followed that trail and went on out through there. And we eventually wound up at the Mudd house, Dr. Samuel Mudd. And it was really funny because they would sometimes they wanted to either blindfold me or have me like look down in the floorboard of the car while we were traveling, so that I didn't know where we were at. And it was really kind of comical, because I said, look, I said, I don't know history to begin with, so you could take me to anywhere and I'm not going to know where we're going or what it is, probably not even after we get there. And the as far as trying to keep me in suspense or surprise me or whatever, or give the implication to people that this guy doesn't know where we're going and whatever. I said, that's the case from the get-go. I said, not only would I not recognize any of these places when we got there, what they were or who was there, whatever, I don't know history to begin with, so it would be meaningless to me anyways. But they did that sometimes. They even have an outtake that they didn't use in the fine cut of the pilot, where they're filming me and I'm staring down at the floorboard of the car as we're traveling along. But anyways, we did that. We get to the Mud House, the Dr. Samuel Mud House, and as we pulled up, I got out and I said, "Was there a doctor here, or a doctor very close by, somewhere that you could run and ride on horseback and say, 'Hey, we need help over here'?" And they said this was a doctor's house. Dr. Mudd lived here, and he was a medical doctor. I said, "Okay." And I said, as I'm standing out here, there was a field out there, looking at the front of the house off to the left. There was this vast field out there. So as I'm standing there, I'm seeing these two figures riding up on horseback. And I said, I get this feeling there's this real melodramatic energy, this real urgency that's emanating from these people that are coming up on horseback. And I said, one of them's Booth. And I said, they know there's a doctor here and they know they can get medical help here. And sure enough, Booth hadn't made the trek alone. He had made it with another guy. And they had ridden up there to the Samuel Mudd House to get medical help. So we go inside, and there's a big bone of contention with the Mudd ancestors. And that contention is that Dr. Mudd didn't recognize Booth, didn't know who he was, blah, blah, blah. And it seems incredulous that he didn't, because there were two confirmed instances where Dr. Mudd had met with Booth in town. Once he went to Booth's hotel room, I believe it was, and they had drinks and talked face to face for a long time. And they talked about horses, trading horses, and about farmland and this, that, and the other. So at least on two separate occasions, Dr. Mudd had met face to face with Booth and knew who Booth was. And not only was that a big factor, and Mudd having to know who Booth was, several people told us that back in the day, Booth was equivalent to Tom Cruise nowadays. That's how famous he was, and that's how well known he was. So if you think of Tom Cruise nowadays, that was Booth back then. That's how well known he was and how famous he was. So it was just incredulous to think that the Mudd family could say, well, he didn't recognize Booth, didn't know who Booth was, blah, blah, blah. And then at one point they said that Booth came in disguise. And yet when the authorities came and talked to Mudd, he was able to give them an exact description of the guy without disguise. And the description was of Booth. So I was picking up on all of that, and the docents that were there, and some of the ancestors, they didn't cotton to that. They didn't like that. They didn't take to that. So, but I said, well, I got to say what I'm seeing, and I got to say what I'm going on here. So Booth had stayed there for a little while after Mudd had set his leg, and there were some really interesting things. Just some things small and some not that I picked up on as we were going through the house. And I said, "There's a room up here." I said, "Booth stayed in this room, didn't he, while he was convalescing a little bit?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "But the bed wasn't where it is now back then." I said, "It was, and this door has been moved." And again, that was correct. The door had been moved. The bed was in a different spot. And I said, I'm seeing Booth like laying up in bed, like maybe with his leg hanging off or whatever. And he's writing. He's got this journal or diary or something. And he's writing. So they confirmed that indeed he had sat there and was writing in this journal or diary or whatever it was. And again, they asked me, was he repentant? Was he sorrowful? And I said, no, he's still convinced in his heart of hearts he's done the right thing. He's put his name into posterity. He's a hero and should be viewed such, and so on and so forth. So while we were there, we also got a lot of paranormal events on camera, which was really neat. They had me look through the house and just pick up various other things, various other energies and spirits or whatever were there that I could pick up on. And the one thing that happened, we were upstairs, and we heard this real loud snap, this real loud crack, like you'd take a big branch and snap it in two, and it came from downstairs. And I said, "There's our ghost." And so we all go. I said, "Let's go downstairs." So we're all running downstairs, the docents and the camera crew and me and everything, and we're all going downstairs. And we had a FLIR camera, forward-looking infrared radiation. And I think, I don't know for sure, but we may have been the very first to use FLIR in a paranormal investigation. And we had a regular camera, then we had the FLIR camera, and they would film me with both. And the FLIR camera, the way that it was set up was, if it was a cold spot, the cold would show up as black on the camera. And if it was hot, if there was heat, it would show up as white on the camera. So they're filming me with the FLIR camera and the regular camera, and we get downstairs, and I walked over into this kitchen area or dining area, whatever it was over there. And the docents and the crew and everybody are standing back opposite me, and they've got the cameras on me, both cameras on me. And I said, "I think this was Mrs. Mudd come back to relive this and to experience this, to tell me what was going on here and to give me information about this." And I said, "Ms. Mudd, are you here?" And I said, she tells me, "Yes, she is," that was her that made the noise. And I said, "She's off over here to my right." And I said, "She's walking toward me right now." And I said, "I feel her passing through me. She's literally walking through me and coming out the other side of me." And as I said that, on the FLIR camera, from the direction I pointed, they got footsteps on the floor, black footsteps, which indicates cold, in women's size period era shoes, walking across the floor toward me as I said that. And we got that on camera. So that was really astonishing. That was really amazing. And then there were some things that she kind of told me about, kind of validating some of the input that I had, some of the feelings I had about Mudd at least having to have known who it was, and so on and so forth. And then just some kind of pleasant, kind of innocuous things, like I said, she's telling me that there were family reunions held here, and really happy, pleasant times that went on here. And they validated that that was true, and she's saying she would like to see that energy here again. She would like to see all the relatives come and convene again and be here again, and so on and so forth.
Were you surprised to know how many people were involved in this? And also, were you shocked that John Wilkes Booth didn't have any regret for what he did?
I was extremely shocked at both of those things. I was just astonished at how deep the conspiracy ran, and it blew my mind that the whole way through, everywhere I go and I'm tuning in on Booth's energy and tuning in on his mindset, he's like, "Man, I'm a hero. I've done the greatest thing there is." And I was like, "Wow, it just blew me away. It blew my mind." So while we were still there at the Mud House, the one of the docents there, and I think he may have been a descendant. I can't remember, but anyways, he was one of the people that worked there at the Mud House, and the sheriff's department come by to check on it and run checks on it all the time, because all these are historical sites, you know. And we were there at night, so he had gone out and told the sheriff. He said, "If you see all these cars here and lights on inside, um, beyond normal hours, we've got a film crew here and we're filming, we're shooting, so that's what'll be going on, just so you know." And they were like, "Okay." So he said, "I'm going to go outside and lock everything up, lock all the buildings up, make sure everything's secure outside, just in case somebody thinks that we're still open because all the cars are here and the lights are on or whatever, so they can't get in any part of the property." So he went through outside, turned all the lights off, turned everything off, locked up all the doors, locked everything outside, and had come back in while we were shooting. And then shortly after that, shortly after the episode with Ms. Mudd, we took a break. And while we were standing there talking, this guy came back in, and he was white. I mean, he was like ashen faced and like trembling, like visibly shaking a little bit. And we were like, "What is wrong?" And he said, "When I went out before, I went out to make sure that everything outside was locked, all the power was turned off, all the lights were turned off, so on and so forth, so that if anybody got on the property, they couldn't get any of the outbuildings or anything like that." And he said, "When I went out just now to check on everything, He said all the doors I had locked were standing open, the lights were on, and in this one like outdoor kitchen area or something, water was running. The tap was open in the sink. And so the spirits had like gone boom and just gone wholesale through this property, unlocked the doors and opened them up, turned the lights on. And this guy was like literally white and like trembling, kind of like shaking a little bit. And it was one of the funny things that happened. I always told people, I said, look, wherever I go, especially during heavy paranormal investigations, things like that, I attract paranormal activity anyways. I always attract spiritual activity. So I said, wherever I go, that's going to follow. And a lot of times the people that are there are going to experience it. And so sure enough, every place I went, it just seemed to heighten it, to really activate it. And what was really funny was my producer told me that after we had filmed my part, then they sent a reenactment crew back to film that, for the period era dress and the people that would play booths and this, that, and the other. And they had the reenactment crew in all these areas. And they said where they would go back to where I had been and done these investigations, that there would be objects there that would suddenly move on their own by themselves. And that the people that were there, all the actors and the film crew and everybody, would see that happen. And that these objects would move on their own. And they were like, holy cow, what is going on here? So that was kind of one of the neat side effects of my investigation, that not only did it heighten it while I was there, it continued for a while. So yeah.
Why do you think the pilot didn't go?
Oh boy. There's a lot of theories on that. And some of it is just, I've learned that this is kind of typical in the industry sometimes, that there can be a famous star with a sitcom they're signed to, and they've shot 4 or 5 episodes, it's in the can, and then the network decides not to go with it. So that's a possibility. It could just be, hey, it's just business as normal. One of the other things that came to mind to me, and I told my producer about this years down the road, and he said, I never knew that. You never told me that before. And I don't know why I'd never told him, but it was just one of those things that was something I just kind of mulled over in my mind and never really talked to him about. But when we were at this other house filming, yeah, so the one of the interesting things was that the other house we were at, where Booth made the brief appearance there or whatever, and a lot of the co-conspirators were at that place. While we were filming there, the docent that was there would give me these really strange, really funny looks while I was telling all my psychic impressions and everything that I was picking up on. And I kept noticing that, and it became really obvious. And so we had a break in the filming, and I walked over to her and I said, can I talk to you a second? Can we go back in one of these other rooms in the house and talk? She said, sure. So we got back in there, and I said, I said, I want you to answer me honestly. I said, from the history that you know, being a docent for this house and all the history you've studied and everything you know about the history of the house, the people that were here, all the ancestors and everything, I said, what I'm saying, what I'm picking up on psychically, do you think I'm accurate or totally inaccurate or 50-50 or what? And she said, oh my God, no. She said, it's amazing. She said, I think you're astonishingly accurate. She said, I think it's incredible. And I said, well, let me ask you something. I see you looking over at me with these odd expressions on your face and everything. And I just wanted to know. That's what prompted me to ask. And she said, no, she said, it just, things are a little uneasy for me, and kind of figuring out how to respond to all this, because I can't go on camera and say that I agree with you about any of this, because a lot of these people's descendants still live in this area, and some of them are pretty powerful people. And if I go on record on camera validating some of these things that you're saying, which these people are not going to like, not going to appreciate, it's going to kind of fly up their nose. She said, I could lose my job. So I was like, oh, okay. So I began to wonder, with some of the things I said at the Mud House and other places, if that didn't somehow make its way back to some of the descendants, and maybe they call up History Channel and said, hey, you're not going to air this, or we're going to sue, or whatever. I don't know. that was just one theory that came to mind, is kind of putting everything together piecemeal there. But who knows? Who knows? But that's some theories and some possibilities as to why it never aired.
Did you trust the History Channel reaching out to you in the first place? Like, what was your suspicion and then your comfort level throughout?
No, I had a really good comfort level with both Atlas Media and the History Channel. Everything was above board. Everything, they took great care of me. They paid me well for that week. Paid me promptly. I didn't have to wait. All that kind of thing. Everything was paid for. Was taken care of. My meals, my hotel, all the transportation, everything was taken care of. So they treated me great. Um, I just, I would like to know, I would like somebody to tell me, hey, we decided just to can this and go a different direction, or, you know, maybe some other reason or whatever it was. And I never really have, tried to put too much psychic thought or energy into it or whatever. It happened, and down the road we go. So, but we got through at the mud house, and then we went to, they drove me out in the Tules, basically out on this highway, and there's just nothing but woods out there on either side of the road, and it's a divided, 2-lane highway. And I'm like, what in God's name are we doing out here? What does this have to do with anything? So they said, well, we'll see what you pick up. So they stop and they pull off the road, and I'm wandering around out here in the little wooded area and everything. I'm like, oh my God. I said, there used to be a house here, right? Was there like a house where all this is now? And they were, yeah, this was a working farm. What is now just highway in this wooded, area used to be a working farm. And I picked up that Booth and his traveling companion had rode there and were staying in this farm and in this guy's barn. And I said, I look around and I said, riding up on horses comes the cavalry. I said, here comes like tons of people on horses, guns drawn, and like, all right, we found him, we're getting him, we're getting him. And they said, yeah, that was exactly the scenario. And so Booth and the other guy were holed up in the barn, and Booth yelled out at the cavalry officers and infantry that had surrounded the barn. He yelled out at them that the other guy wanted to surrender, wanted to come out, which he did. And Booth himself refused to surrender, refused to come out. And while I was standing there was another docent with me, and we were standing there. And before they had told me all that about everything that happened in the barn, I said, I get the feeling that Booth met his demise right here, either on this very spot or very, very close to it. And the docent told me, he said, you're standing within a few yards of where Booth died, where Booth met his death. So I was gobsmacked. It was unreal. And then subsequently, I found out that when they ordered Booth to come out, he was hobbling around inside on his game leg with his gun and still resisting. And I can't remember the guy's name that shot him, but the guy had his revolver out and was trying to get a bead on him, and I think was just trying to wing him. And Booth was hobbling around so erratically that he wound up, I think, shooting him through the neck. And they took Booth outside, and from there he died. And right there on the spot where he died, I could sense that energy, and I could still feel that he had no remorse for what he had done, and no regret. That it was like, okay, I committed myself to this cause. I paid my dues. I have no regrets or anything else. So that was kind of mind blowing to me to realize that. But to be out there in the middle of nowhere and to pick up, hey, there used to be a house over here, and to see all these things transpiring and coming about, and then have that validated, that was really an amazing, amazing, amazing thing.
And that didn't
So
spark
all
up your interest in
normal.
history?
Do what now?
That didn't spark up your interest in history?
Nope.
Damn, dude.
Still hate it. Still not interested in it. Still don't like it. So, of all the paranormal investigations I've done, that obviously is the top tier, the big one, the most traumatic one, the most memorable one, the most high profile one. So that was just, it doesn't get any better than that. You can't ask for more than that.
Is there anything that you would sign up for again if you were going to be reached out to the History Channel? Like, did they ever offer any other things that they were working on or anything like that?
They didn't, and I wish they would have. And my producer that I mentioned, Jim Mullen, he and I became friends during this and stayed friends. We're still friends to this day. And shortly after that, one of the we continued to work on things together and try and get me on TV, on programs, try and get me on some type of show and develop some type of show. And we were never able to do that. And what was interesting was that I had determined when we went into this thing to shoot this pilot that I was going to make believers out of everybody in the crew. And some people believe, some people were kind of like, maybe. And some people were like, no, not happening. Don't believe in it. And so I said, my goal was to make everybody a believer, especially my producer, because he was kind of like on the fence at that time. And one of the things that happened, like one of the things I did, I would tune in on people like as we were traveling. And people think shooting a TV pilot is glamorous, that being on TV is glamorous. It is ridiculously hard work. Casting call was at 6 a.m. You get up dressed at 6 a.m. You get in the van, start filming at 6 a.m. and you film all day long with a short break to eat. And you film till 9 o'clock at night, midnight that night, maybe. Downtime a little bit, maybe have a drink, a late dinner, go to bed, go to sleep, casting calls at 6 again, and you do that for a week. So it's tiring as heck. There's nothing glamorous about it. It's just extremely tiring. But I was determined during this procedure that when we were traveling and we weren't filming, we had a little break in between, that I would tune into the various people and give them things about their lives that they would know or that they could validate that they knew there was no way that I could possibly know. So, like with my producer, we were en route and he had gotten a call from a friend of his. And I was sitting there beside him in the van and I tapped him on the leg and I said, I have to interrupt you. And he goes, what is it? I said, this guy that you're talking to, he has just become the executor for a relative's estate. And I named the relative. I can't remember who it was now. And I said, ask him if that's correct. So he said, hey, he said, has your aunt or whoever it was just died? And are you the executor of the will? And the guy was like, yeah, how the hell did you know that? And he goes, we're we're filming the psychic. And he just interrupted me and told me to tell you that or to ask you that. And I said, tell him this. I said, everything looks pretty good, but tell him to make sure, and all the papers, the will, and everything he has to do, make sure all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, really go over this thing with a fine tooth comb. And so he told him, he was like, holy cow. So that began to everybody was like, there's no way in hell this guy sitting beside me could know this. I didn't even know this. So I would do things like that to convince people of the reality of a psychic gift, the reality of a connection with the other side, and that we can get that information in an accurate manner and use it to better our lives or to get the information we need in our lives and so on and so forth. So I did that for everybody. And I think by the end of the thing, I think everybody was at least to a degree a believer in myself and psychic abilities and in what I'd been able to do. And I remember this one time we were in the band, it was at night. And I said, little dead orange cat, little dead orange cat. I said, who had the little dead orange cat? And one of the crew people on the back went, oh, I had a little orange cat that died. And I said that he's with you and around, just wants me to tell you that he's there and wants you to know that he hadn't forgotten you, that he loves you, and that he hangs around you in spirit. They're like, oh, that's really awesome. And then the next day when we hooked up with the crew again, they were like, you're never going to believe what happened. We were like, what? They said, I was sitting in my bedroom last night and I had this weird feeling. And I opened up the curtain, looked out, and sitting out the end of my driveway is this orange cat staring in my window. And then it just went away, just vanished. And I was like, cool. So I was determined, like I said, I wanted everybody. I didn't want it to be an entertainment show. I didn't want it to be a show where we shot this guy and he got this stuff. And yeah, that was impressive. And I don't know how he did it, but here it is. And I just did it to shoot it. And that's my job. I didn't want it to be that. I wanted this to make an impact on people. And I wanted them to believe, and I wanted them to have an experience with the other side and understand the reality of that. And so that was the impetus for that, the motivation for that. And I think it made that impression. I think I was able to do that with everybody. And I remember my producer invited me to see the fine cut of the show, the show that would have aired, the half hour that would have aired, and it was just so amazing. It was done so respectfully and done so well, and it just would have made such a tremendous impact if we got it to air. And I remember my producer telling me at the time, he said, "My God," he said, "I have enough good, legitimate material here from you to do a month's worth of shows. How am I going to condense this down to a 30-minute pilot?" He said, "I've got enough here to do, virtually a season nearly just from this 1 week's of outing, this one episode." And I told him, I said, that if we can keep going, I said, that's going to be that's not going to be a drop in the bucket. I said, the other side will open up and give us more and more, and we'll see more and more, and there'll be more and more.
You
So it was a real disappointment then when we didn't get to do that.
It was my one final question for you, but do you really believe that pilot could have probably ushered in a whole new way of thinking when it came to psychic abilities about things?
I do believe it would have, especially if we had got to continue the series, because we didn't do any stupid stuff. We didn't do any screaming and yelling and jumping out of the room, and I didn't panic when paranormal stuff happened. And I told the camera crew, I said, "Look, if something happens that scares you, you see something paranormal, you hear something paranormal, something happens, some manifestation occurs, don't jump, don't run, keep that camera rolling. Keep that camera on it, keep that camera on me." I said, "If you see me run out of the house and yell for you to follow, then you run. Unless that happens, everything's copacetic. You keep that film going." Because I wanted them to understand, I want you to get this on camera. I want to document this. I want this to be something we can show people and validate the reality of these experiences. And it just, like I say, it was done in such a respectful way, and there was no histrionics, and there was no, they didn't put any goofy special effects or any weird music or anything like that. And I think it would have been light years above and beyond anything that anybody has done or really is doing now, especially since some of the quote unquote big names in the so-called ghost hunting industry have gotten caught faking things and so on and so forth recently. So, we had everything so above board and so honest and so dignified. I think it really would have made a big impact on a lot of people.
I'm jealous of your experience, Russell, but I do appreciate the time you're able to give me to share it.
Oh, you're welcome. Listen, it was incredible. I can't describe to you the immense feeling of standing on the spot where those historical figures stood and being able to absorb that energy and psychically see and feel all of those things replay, and the emotions of the people involved and the actions of the people involved, and to get those details that might have been missed by history or whatever. And it was just it was mind blowing. It was really something else, really, really incredible. And I write a little bit about that in my second book, A Knock in the Attic. It has the story of doing the investigation of Lincoln's assassination. So for those that want to read that, it's in the second book.
Where can people find your links, Russell?
They can go to, if they want a psychic reading, they can go to johnrussell.net. And if they want more information on my books, I've got 3 books out now and more coming soon. They can go to johnrussellauthor.com. So johnrussell.net for the readings, johnrussellauthor.com for the books.
I'll make sure I link all those in the description. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode about the blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.